I had been in an insane asylum, and I figured out a way to get back onto the rugby field, even though I didn't have one knee, even though I was mentally unstable. I overcame all these obstacles, even though I had attempted suicide twice. Like, I couldn't, I might as well not even be here. When that happened, it was just such disdain for the world. But I had this hungriness inside of me that was like, all right, we're going to deal with this. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get better. But in the moment when I went down on that field, it felt like the world ended for me.
Today I'm here with Tyler Kania, and he is a rugby player, coach, cybersecurity salesman, cryptocurrency entrepreneur, and stonesmanson painter, and a writer from Connecticut, Columbia. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your show.
Can you explain us the journey and a little bit about your background of playing rugby?
Yeah, I played football in high school. I was the captain of my high school team. We're inner city, and I played safety and long snapper. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the long snapping motion and passing a rugby ball are kind of similar. So, when you're a long snapper, you have to be really accurate getting it to the kicker or the punter. I spent so long finding my skills that when I went to college and joined rugby, I was instantly a star. And I played fly half, which is similar to quarterback in football. So I'm in charge of the passing, the kicking, the play calling, basically orchestrating the offense. My college team was really good. We won 3 conference championships. Um, we were close to winning a national championship at one point. We won this tournament, and at the championship game of this tournament, I had scored 4 tries, four scores, and this coach from a premier rugby team was in attendance. At the time, there was no MLR in America. There was no Major League Rugby. So what they had at the highest level, there was basically guys with venture capital backing that would get guys from around the world and get them green cards to come play in the United States for them. So I got recruited to play for one of those teams. There was guys that had played for Team USA, guys that had represented Fiji and Australia on the international level. And I found that I could play with them. It was a adjustment, but I figured it out. Things were going great, but when I was 24, I ruptured my patellar tendon for the first time. It's a really rare injury. It happens once for every 147,000 human years. It's actually happened to me twice, and the second time was last year, which we'll get to. When that first accident happened, it was really traumatic. When someone has a compound fracture and their bone comes out of their skin, that's a really scary sight. It's the same thing when your knee goes into your quad and then your leg's just dangling there. So I quit rugby. I went manic. I was an undiagnosed bipolar, and this was my first ever manic episode. So I quit rugby. I quit my 6-figure job in cybersecurity sales. My girlfriend broke up with me because I was literally crazy. And I moved to Idaho. I just spent a long time around the West, but I did come back to rugby.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. A lot of times when we play sports as kids and we grow up to grow a passion for it, we really want to take it to a professional level as much as we can. And that's essentially what you did with rugby. But you also mentioned that you had a really rare injury. So, can you explain how that affected your mental health and it made you go manic for a short period?
Yeah, rugby was where I found my confidence. There were times in my life before that and definitely times after where I didn't have much confidence. But when I was on a rugby field, I knew that I could do it. And it brought so much joy to me to have people relying on me and people cheering me on. I had big goals for it. I had big aspirations. I tell people with mental illness, 2 out of the 3 things that you need to live a stable life are a community and a goal. So when I lost those 2 things with my knee, it was devastating. Compound that with the pain, staying awake at night and not being able to do things for yourself. Blood clots. I had blood clots in my ankle. Those things are just a ticking time bomb when you have an underlying mental illness that's not being addressed. When I see other people playing or when I talk to another rugby player, I have that urge to want them to know how good I once was. And that all comes from the disappointment that they didn't find out for themselves. I wasn't able to prove that to the world. I'm still chasing it, and my knees don't really work very well right now, but I'm working hard. One of the girls that I coach when I was coaching a college team, I talked to her recently. She sent me a picture of a Team USA player after USA was in the Olympics, and she said that could have been me. I told her, I said, that could still be you. And even if it's not, the pursuit of a dream is what keeps us going. It's what drives us to get better. It's not about where you end up. It's about knowing that you gave it your all like every single day and you pushed yourself. Those knees were really traumatic and they really disrupted my mental health, right? They made me go manic. They made me completely throw my life away. But rugby and what it does for me is something that I wish everybody that was struggling had in their life.
Like you said, as long as you give it your all and you give your best, then you know you can rest your head on the pillow and say, I did a good job. How was your support like? Did you have a community of support around you when you were going through these challenges and struggles? Or was it mainly you trying to figure it out? Can you walk us through that?
Before I mention the bad, I'll say the good. I'm so fortunate in life to have the parents and the family that I have, the brother that I have. They've supported me through thick and thin. They've pushed me to get help. I'm from a very small town and my group of friends is inseparable. I've been friends with these guys since we were 3 or 4. There were nights where I thought I was going to commit suicide and I would call one of them and it'd be over in 5 minutes. I'm really thankful for that. When you're bipolar and you have manic episodes, you're gonna burn a lot of bridges, especially when you're undiagnosed. I've done that. I've done that on a professional level to the point where friends will unadd me on LinkedIn and people will say they want to get me a job and then I go through a manic phase and they take it back and that hurts. I've had teammates not want to be associated with me because of manic episodes where I said the wrong things and I was not in control of my behavior during those periods. Some people understand that and some people don't. Everybody forms a judgment and they might not be so prone to share things with you, even if they're supporting you. All those things suck because when I'm stable, when I'm okay, I'm a really good person. I'm a good friend. I'm trustworthy and I work hard. When I was the head coach of the women's rugby team, we won a conference championship. It was 6 months after I attempted suicide, and it felt like I had this new group of people that gave me purpose in my life. I hadn't really felt human interaction with the opposite sex in like 5 or 6 years, and then I was in charge of 30 college women, and I fell in love with the job, and I got there early every day. I studied film relentlessly. I was doing well with my cryptocurrencies. I bought the team $3,000 worth of stuff, and we won the conference championship. We hadn't been good the whole time, but we rallied in the playoffs and we crushed an undefeated team in the championship, and it was the most rewarding feeling that ever happened. I eventually started a cryptocurrency company, tried to get funding in Denver. That, worked really well. Like I was manic and, I was able to talk to venture capitalists and technologists really well. And, when you're manic, you just have these grandiose thoughts. And I thought I was about to change the world. And I went home and I trusted this guy with, my cryptocurrency wallet, and he stole $450,000 from me. And the next day I went to coach the women's rugby team and I was manic, I was crazy, disorganized, disoriented. And at the time, their old coach was trying to form a coup to get his job back. And so, that one practice after winning the conference championship in my first year was the excuse to get rid of me. And a lot of these girls turned against me. I had thought of them as my friends, and a lot of them really treated me really, really poorly because of who I was that one practice and not who I was for the year before that. Some girls stuck with me and they remain some of my best friends because we've been through so much together. But it really does hurt when you lose people you enjoy being around. But that's just part of being
Yeah.
bipolar.
Were you taking any medications for like the bipolar disorder or when you were having manic episodes? And if you did, do you feel like they were helping or do you feel like were there side effects that were causing more confliction?
When I was coaching the women's team, I might have been on um, antidepressants, but they did not work. I went through like a 2-year period where I cycled through a lot of different medications and none of them really seemed to work. Antipsychotics, antidepressants, Wellbutrin, all kinds of stuff. At one point, my psychiatrist put me on an early stage antipsychotic that was not in pharmacies. I had to pick it up from his office, and that drug turned me gay for 3 months. That was the worst side effect that I've ever had. It was really traumatizing to be dealing with suicidal thoughts while also having to try and figure out who you are. And my entire life I had been straight, so it was just such a weird feeling and it didn't feel good. Eventually I stopped that medication and those thoughts stopped. It was a really tough period of time. Eventually I did get on the right medication. It took being institutionalized. That was a long journey.
What are some things along on your journey that have helped you rebuild yourself from going through those mental conditions like the bipolar and the manic phases? What has helped you restabilize yourself for the long term?
Yeah, I mentioned how I stopped playing rugby after my first ruptured patellar tendon. I had stopped for 4.5 years. Things got pretty bad. Things got pretty good at one point. I was making a quarter million when I was 26. Like, I had some serious psychiatric issues that I didn't, they were unexplainable. I had to move home. I spent the next year just reading 300 pages of literature per day, completely disassociating myself from the world. At the end of that year, I tried to commit suicide. I realized when I had the rope around my neck that my friend was getting married the next day, and I didn't want to ruin that for him. Figured I would stick around a little longer. Friends were definitely one thing, right? Going to that wedding, and it was the little things, right? Like a guy gets you a beer when he's up, or someone dances with you. They don't know that you tried to commit suicide the day before or what it actually means, but it meant a lot. And the next week, I get invited to this rugby birthday party, and I hadn't played rugby in 4.5 years. I had been these guys' captain in college, right? The fly half, the leader of the team, endless confidence. And now I was coming off a suicide attempt. I hadn't had a job in a year. All these guys were moving in with their girlfriends or getting married, and I was living with my parents, and I didn't want to go to this party at all. But something inside me told me I had to go. I get there, and they convinced me to come attend their exhibition rugby match the next weekend. And they tell me that our old college coach is now the men's team coach for the Hartford Wanderers. I go there, I'm in jeans. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to watch my friends play and drive home. But my coach's wife was there, and we stood next to each other, and she had brought me all this confidence back in college, and now she was telling me, you got to get back out there. I said it's an exhibition match, so it was informal, and an injury happened with like 10 minutes left. And somehow I ended up on the field and I assisted the game winning score. And, all of a sudden I was back into rugby. It was like divine intervention. God was like, you need this. I got back into the game. And that's right before I got hired as the college women's team coach. I stayed around rugby, and even now, like, I've ruptured my second patellar tendon, and my rehab has taken longer because of my age, but I've continued to stay around the rugby team because that's my community, and I need that support system to, keep going. Rugby has been huge for me, just finding that community. And finally, writing. I found that late, but it's been a godsend. Therapy is like having a mirror for your thoughts, and writing is no different. Write about my traumas, and I share these things on Instagram, share a post a day, a one-page story. And I have this community now of people that, love my writing.
Sounds like you have a true passion for rugby, and no matter the challenges that you faced with rugby, it's still a passion that lies in your heart. And I think that's so beautiful. I remember when I was growing up, I was a dancer. That's where my heart was. I remember if I had a bad day, somebody annoyed me, had some stress, I would just go to the dance studio, dance it off, and I would leave feeling completely recharged. So I can relate with you that when you find something you're passionate about, that's where you want to be. Like nothing makes you happier. Congratulations for overcoming all of those challenges and still continuing to have that passion for it. It's so easy to be faced with those challenges and then have a negative and pessimistic mindset about it and life moving forward, but you chose to grow through it. And you chose that you said that you may need to take a break now, but it doesn't mean forever. That's a beautiful way to stay connected, especially if that's a very uplifting community for you. So, congratulations for just growing through all of that.
Thank you.
You were talking a little bit about how you were having suicidal thoughts. Can you explain to us how that was on day to day? When we go through really challenging times, it may cross people's minds more than we would ever think. Even sometimes people who you think have it all perfect on the outside, you would never expect them to have suicidal thoughts. So, can you explain to us what that was like?
Yeah, I kept this all to myself for a long time. A lot of people did look at me as that jock or that successful cybersecurity guy, but I've had two suicide attempts. Right? Once it was trying to hang myself, and the second time I overdosed on medication on purpose. When you're suicidal, it's all encompassing. When I had lost my life savings in cryptocurrency and lost my passion for coaching in the same week, I kept a rope in my room, right? In case I was ready to step off the chair one night. I didn't really leave bed, but when I did, it was to walk my dog, and I would see illusions of myself just hanging from a tree every day for months. So what people don't realize is it's a comforting feeling. You can end all of your pain right here and right now. Like it feels great, but it's rooted in misery. It's rooted in just feeling complete rejection from the world. No one understands you. You're never gonna improve your position in life. It's gonna be in your head nonstop. It can be tough, right? Oh, look, I'm stable. I wrote this book. I had the courage to share my experience with the world. A lot of bipolars or whoever see me on all these podcasts, see me on TV, see me wherever, read my book, and they think I'm on the other side of bipolar. They think I made it through it. But this is a lifelong condition, and I'm always going to be suffering. I'm not suicidal today, but I thought of suicide today, right? And there's a difference. I wasn't ruminating on it nonstop. It was you have an embarrassing thought, and the first thing that happens when you close your eyes is you picture a noose or a gun. And that's going to be with me forever, right? No matter how successful I get, no matter if I find a family or become a famous writer, there's always going to be part of me, even with the medication that I'm on, that really finds solace in that feeling. I've realized that I have a lot more to do, and I do enjoy life. And I do enjoy the anticipation of what's to come. There are times in my life where that wasn't the case. Made through that much, but I'm cognizant that any day now I could lose my sanity, or I could lose it all and be right back there.
Very brave of you to choose to grow through your dark times and your challenging times. It's a really brave thing to do because it reveals how strong you are. You're stronger than you know. I really don't talk about this often myself, but when I was in a really unhealthy marriage, I remember I was so miserable to the point where I have thought about suicide too. There would be times where I would think about it and I just didn't feel heard. I know that like being in a unhealthy relationship and what you were faced with, different situations, but they were both dark times for us. I never felt heard. I didn't feel loved. I felt like I was literally arguing with a tree all the time and nothing was getting better. Felt like I lost my purpose. So that I started to numb myself by being at work. I loved working at the salon on weekends, holidays, nights, all of it. I was there all the time. It wasn't just a typical 9 to 5 job. So I had the opportunity to always be there. And that's how I would always numb is by working. So I have full compassion for anyone who is going through dark times and has those kinds of thoughts because it can be a tough place to be. But for whoever is listening to this, it's possible to rewrite your story. It's possible to get out of dark times. You and I have different challenges and different dark times. And you're an amazing example of how you've grown through it and you decided to keep pushing forward. And dark times and the challenges, they're just there to help shape you into who you're supposed to be and to help you find your purpose. Your dark times and your challenging times don't define who you are.
Definitely.
What advice would you give to somebody who is going through dark and challenging times and they feel like there is no hope? What advice would you give to somebody who currently feels like that?
Yeah. First you gotta take it day by day. You gotta have some compassion for yourself. You gotta find that community and that goal like I talked about because we need to be around people that respect us. We need to be around people that lift us up, make us feel good. We need goals to want to better ourselves. We have goals so that we can wake up every morning and be on a mission. The final thing is medication. And, that's a scary one, right? Like I've had my own challenges with going through the cycle of trying different meds because a psychiatric illness is not easy to prescribe for. It might get harder before it gets better. You got to just keep that faith. You have to realize that even if you don't know it today, that you have a purpose and that you're going to achieve a lot more someday. You just got to get okay. So, when you find those medications, for me, like I said, I had to be institutionalized. I had to, spend all that time in an inpatient setting and then an outpatient setting. But my first day there, they got me on lithium, a mood stabilizer, which has saved my life. And I wouldn't be here without that. When I finally got the real help, I tried to tiptoe into it for so long, but I needed real help. And once I got that, how did I go so long feeling this way without really doing something about it? And I'm not talking about therapy, I'm not talking about Zoloft, right? Like I'm talking about getting real psychiatric help. A lot of people need that.
Okay. When you were going through those dark times, did you have some kind of spiritual or faith relationship?
Not really, to be honest. I didn't know what to believe in. I was raised Catholic, but the more I've read about the proliferation of Christianity, the more I've kind of resented that. But going through all these experiences, my life is too serendipitous to be random. There's so many weird experiences that I've been through that over time have made me certain that something more powerful than man was pulling the strings, right? Whether it was the bad things or the good things, whether it was losing my life savings and my passion as a coach, or whether it was going manic and deciding to write my book, being the first time I've ever written anything and the first time I've ever had a manic episode turn out to be good. you know, I just feel like something has to be there.
You wrote a book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote and how it helped you along on your journey as well, and how it can help other people?
Yeah, the book is a memoir about my life journey with undiagnosed bipolar. It's about having success in rugby and having success in cybersecurity or as a coach, but also having this illness that every year, every couple of years, pokes its head out and devastates everything in my life. It's about adventures and going across the country and trying to escape your mental prison by just running from it. And, I made every mistake you could possibly make as someone who's mentally ill. Um, but eventually that journey brought me to a place where I needed help, a place where it was life or death. And that all ended in a mental hospital where, I met schizophrenics and narcissists and people that were getting electroshock therapy and people who had seen their wife commit suicide. And my roommate had aphasia, which is when you have a trauma that makes you unable to talk for long periods of time. And I was able to start a conversation with him and form a friendship. And I was inspired by all of these people who I met in inpatient who had lost their freedom by going into this mental hospital where they cannot go outside, where they cannot choose what to do, where they cannot eat decent food or even have shoelaces or a fork. I was inspired by them because they've been through things that even I can't understand. And they suffer and they don't have the blessings that I have. That was one thing that I really took away from that experience, was how blessed I am compared to a lot of these people, right? Like, I come from a wealthy white nuclear educated family. I was blessed with athleticism and wit and decent looks. A lot of people don't have that source of confidence, and because of their mental illness, they're ashamed of who they are. They were never going to tell their story. I didn't really know what to do about it, but I was inspired and I went about my life and I got my life back together and I started working for the largest cybersecurity company in the world. And I started, training hard for rugby and I got in the best shape of my life. And then I ruptured my patellar tendon again. Just such a rare injury. And it brings you back to someone's pulling the strings, because when I hurt that knee, I went manic for the first time since I was institutionalized. And I just started writing my life story to my followers on Instagram. And I had to be hospitalized for that manic episode. And when I got out, I had all this encouragement, all this positive feedback. And I realized that it was my duty and my responsibility to speak up for all the mentally ill people that are suffering and to tell the world what it's like to go through this, to go through suicidal depression, to go through manic episodes that ruin all the progress that you have ever made. The more I wrote, the more encouragement I got. Once that manic episode subsided, I sat down and I said, I need to write this book. And the first week that I finished the first draft on Instagram, I published the whole first draft to Instagram. I got fired from that job, the largest cybersecurity company in the world, for a manic episode, the same manic episode that I had when I ruptured my patellar tendon and started my book. That was a blessing in disguise. It gave me the freedom to spend the next 8 months focusing on making my book the best thing that I could do.
I'm really glad that you're able to look at it from that perspective, because a lot of times, even though if we like our job and we enjoy what we do for work, if we get let go from a job, it's honestly a blessing in disguise. It may not make sense at the current moment, but it will eventually show you why it was a blessing because it's going to lead you on a better path. You went through your first injury and then you went through these phases and then you injured yourself again. What was that time gap in between?
8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was your mindset the second time around when you injured your knee again?
That was the most frustrating thing that's ever happened because when you're hospitalized in a mental hospital, you you don't have any confidence. You don't have a wink of it, and you don't think that you're ever gonna get better. I did get better. I worked so hard. I spent a year running 4 miles a day, lifting weights every single day, basically spending 3 hours of every day on fitness just to get back on the rugby field. And I was the best player that I have ever been, you know, and I knew that I was, and everybody knew that I was. Even though I was 31 years old, I still like the MLR, the Major League Rugby was not around when I came in. If I did, like that would have been an opportunity. A couple years earlier, I had worked out for an MLR team once they finally came about in 2018, and I finally rejoined playing rugby again in 2021. I got to work out in front of some, and finally in 2024, like I was like, I can compete with anybody. And then it happened on the first play of my second game. I hardly had the opportunity to prove myself to anybody. It just felt so unfair. It just felt devastating. Like everything that I had ever worked for. I had been in an insane asylum and I figured out a way to get back onto the rugby field, even though I didn't have one knee, even though I was mentally unstable. I overcame all these obstacles, even though I had attempted suicide twice. Like I might as well not even be here. When that happened, it was just such disdain for the world, but I had this hungriness inside of me that was like, all right, we're going to deal with this. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get better. But in the moment when I went down on that field, it felt like the world ended for me.
You are such an incredible example on what it is to go through dark times and to overcome them. You have every reason to be negative. You had every reason to be pessimistic and be in the victim mentality. But instead of being in the victim mentality, you really learned how to pull yourself out of a dark place and use it for your purpose. Something that I've learned from going through challenging times is that it's the stories are really not for us. Like they are to a certain extent, but they're actually there to serve a purpose to other people. And now you can use your story and your personal experiences to help others. And I think that's absolutely incredible. Please tell us, where can people find you and support you, and where can they purchase your book?
I post a lot of my writing on Instagram, usually a story a day, sometimes two. My Instagram is at Tyler_Kania. You can go to my website, tylerkania.com. That's Kania. Otherwise, go to Amazon and search for The Maniac with No Knees. That's the name of my book.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tyler.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.